Welcome to our webinar with our special guest today, Gail from Ipso Factor. I have known Gail for a long time, but I still don't know how to pronounce her second name. So she can, I've known her for, I don't know how many years now, 5 years, maybe, yeah. And today, Gail is going to take us through some slides and some learnings around business resilience for managers and CEOs during these difficult times. So I'll hand it over to you, Gail.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. So my last name is Ciriego or Ciriego, if we are pronouncing in Italian. So obviously, for those who don't know me, so just a bit of background before we start. I have spent most of my life actually helping businesses from the HR viewpoint, or like I like to call it from the people aspect. And the reason I like to call it the people aspect is because I think HR sometimes have maybe a little bit of a bad connotation and it may be seen as very bureaucratic, whereas the people encompass everything. And in my career, I spent most of my time actually working with tech industry, and yes, we had to do actually some procedure and legal aspect, but more or less my role as with the people function, for instance, is very much to facilitate and speed up the business success. Okay, so today actually we're going to look at business resilience, and I'm sure you all heard about this sentence. We say culture eats strategy for breakfast, and I think it's Drucker who said that. And whilst everybody need a great strategy to be successful, the culture and the item that form the company culture are not, if they are not there, it might take longer to reach a desired outcome for your business, for instance. Okay, so when difficult time arise, like maybe I think now and maybe for the coming months, actually, I think we are going to go through perhaps a phase of hardship. Actually, I think actually it's very important for your organization to ensure that they retain what makes them great, even during a period of contraction. And that's what we are going to look at today. Okay, so it's about preserving your business critical factor during a hardship time. And as your business move, from growth to contraction, we are going to try to look at what's essential to preserve. Okay. And what we are going to look at today is the critical factor, which are also, of course, we understand that money and revenue are very important critical factor. We are going to look at the people aspect today, where I'm specialized. There's much more people who are much more qualified than I to speak about maybe how to monetize your business. But here we're going to look at the people critical factors such as culture, staff morale, and how to keep focus in an uncertain and difficult environment and create resilience. And what I mean by resilience is people resilience and organization resilience. Okay, so that's that. So before we start really, I'm sure you all wish your company had a graph like that, a pure hockey stick. And right now in this time, actually, I think the only company I must know actually who have I know of who has perhaps a graph like that will be Zoom. Zoom share are doing fantastically well. So even though actually company wish, and or aspire to have a graph which is very which like that, the true reality is a graph actually will be very much actually about growth, and then actually making a little bit of consolidation here and then growth again. And if you think about the way it might go, the second phase of growth, it might actually just be a little bit slower, plateau, or going down. Okay, and what you find here is what we call actually what I call a very important point within the organization to understand actually this point. And when we're actually going down like that, which maybe some of the business are doing right now, we need to remember ourselves that actually, even though actually we are going down, is with the view to go up again, for instance. So we need to remind ourselves that the basic fact is that every time our business suffers a contraction, it's with the view and the hope that it will grow again. And while actually we turn on the survival mode during those times, and it's worth considering that what you want your business to be when you start to expand again, and what you want your business to be like when actually we are getting actually more revenue in, for instance, and what you will be like actually to speed up your recovery and speed up the growth of your business. So it's very important actually when we are doing through a period of contraction to think about what you will want your business, what you want to preserve from your business. What we want actually maybe to do as well during this, during these times is also maybe press a reset button, okay? And I'm not saying actually every organization needs to do that because you have danger with that, and we're going to speak about that in a moment. But the reset button is also very much about, what was not working and how we want our business to look like when we are going to expand again, that we didn't manage to get when we were, at the peak, for instance. So that's something actually we are going to speak about, okay? So one of the things actually we're going to look at, for instance, how do we recognize one of these inflection points, for instance, and stuff you might find quite common in businesses when we are actually going through this contraction, is the fact that you will have resourcing issue, you will have human energy who are going up, your ideas as well might go up because we are actually in a kind of fighting mode. But the rate of outcome of your business and the confusion, frustration, and time to execute is going to increase, okay? And that's actually something that we will recognize all when we are going through this period of contraction. Resourcing issue, human energy is going up, maybe the ideas are going up as well, but the rate of outcome, confusion, frustration, and time to execute are maybe going to go up. And what we want actually is to avoid that, obviously. Okay, and if that feels very strangely familiar to you, the question is, how do we improve on the current situation and build more engagement and resilience in the organization? Because my view is if you reduce the confusion, the frustration, and time to execute, you are more likely to actually go out of this phase much quicker. Okay, and for this, actually, we need to dissociate, first of all, two kinds of resilience. The resilience I'm talking about is the business resilience. And the business resilience, as you can read yourself, is the ability to rapidly adapt and respond to business disruption, safeguard people and assets while maintaining continuous business operation. And then you can see actually inside of the business resilience, you also actually the people aspects already touched upon, okay? And then what I'm going to look at today much more, it's the workforce resilience and it's the ability to create an environment at work where people can better adapt to adverse situation, manage stress and retain motivation. And as you can imagine, one doesn't quite go with the other one. If you have a good business resilience, you are more likely to have a workforce resilience. And if you have a workforce resilience, your business is more likely to be resilient as well, okay? So I think it's important to have both. The question is, okay, how do we achieve, workforce resilience? And for this, I'm going to go back to a theory, a theory which I thought was developed, during the Second World War, actually. Though I still use actually this theory nowadays because I think it's quite still relevant. And this theory is the theory of Maslow hierarchy of need. So you might actually be familiar with that, but in short, actually, the person who developed that, Abraham Maslow, argued that the human have a series of needs, okay, and some of which must be met before they can turn their attention towards others. So, for instance, certain what we call universal needs are the most pressing, while acquired emotion are of secondary importance. And you're going to see how I'm going to make the link to the workplace in a moment, okay? But let's actually first of all go through this needs. The first one, obviously, is what we call the physiological, very hard to say for a French person, physiological, needs. The fact is that if we can't breathe, if we don't have food, if we don't have water, if we are deprived of sleep, for instance, or if we don't have this kind of homeostasis, which regulate the internal environment to process our energy and ultimately to survive, we are not going to achieve anything else than survival, okay? So that's actually the first need that we need to have, which are the physiological need. And then the second layer for that, and I'm going to speak about layer rather than pyramids, because for me, I think the pyramid is slightly outdated. I speak more about layer nowadays, but the second layer will be actually what we call the safety layer, okay, the safety needs. And that is that we have a roof above our head. So we have a place actually we can sleep and rest. There's a place where we feel secure, for instance, but it's also a place actually where we need actually to have a bit of money or a way to have money to actually buy food, for instance, and put a roof over our head and have somewhere where we can call home. The next layer is love and belonging. And I'm not going to say make your workplace a loving environment, but at least make it a belonging of environment. And we're going to see the reason why. And the next layer, actually, the love belonging, is very much about friendship, family, and having a sense of belonging and community. And then the fourth layer is what we call esteem, means self-esteem, confidence, and respect of myself and respect of other. And the top part is what we call the self-actualization. And it may be loosely described as the full use and exploitation of talent, capability, potential. And people who actually manage to have this self-actualization seems to be fulfilling themselves and to be doing the best of what they are capable of doing, okay? So the reason I'm using actually Maslow hierarchy of need is because that can very much be put into the workplace for creating workforce resilience. If you think about it, actually, Maslow hierarchy of need is relevant to organization theory because both are concerned with human motivation, okay? And understanding what people need and how people need may differ, for instance, and that's a very important part of effective management. The organization actually who have leverage on that for a very long time are most of actually the very big organization in Silicon Valley. If you think about, like the likes of Apple, the likes of, Facebook, Twitter, you name it, okay? What they have realized 20 years ago, whenever they were created, is that if I can actually provide all these needs in the workplace, the staff is very likely to be more engaged, more secure, and therefore create a psychological contract. So for instance, the physical need in the workplace will be very much about actually, do I have a place to work? Do I feel actually I have a shelter? Do I think actually, I have food and drink and access? I know it sounds silly, the lavatory were clean, a clean and healthy environment where I can be. I know we don't think about that very often because it's taken for granted. It's like actually the central heater, we take that for granted. Our grandparents didn't have that. And when it came, it was just a revolution. But here actually in the workplace is the basic thing we need to actually establish, the physical need we need to establish to actually create the first layer of well-being at home, at work. And the second part actually obviously is the security. Do I feel actually that I'm secure at work? Do I feel that I have the structure that support me at work? And again, actually, when we're going on a period of contraction, security, I don't mean that my job is necessarily secure, but if I stay in the organization, do I have the security that, or do I feel that the management team is going to look after me if I stay within the organization, for instance, or the company is going to give me the security, for instance. And then actually we have the social need, for instance, which is very much about, do I feel I belong at work? Do I feel I belong to a group? Do I feel I'm trusted at work? Do I feel I'm accepted at work? And that will lead obviously to the esteem, which is about stature, responsibility, reputation, respect, and confidence. And that actually will lead to self-actualization, which is personal growth and fulfillment, okay? And at work, what we find is that organizations that take and provide approach to creating resilience through meaningful health and well-being initiative outperform their peer in terms of productivity, quality of work, talent acquisition as well, and retention, because obviously people are going to talk about the organization, they're going to put good reviews on Glassdoor, and that actually will attract talent. And crucially, their people are happier at work because of it all, and they are more likely to have a psychological contract with the organization and want to do well, even in the time when actually it's getting hard. One thing we need to touch upon, actually, I wanted maybe to mention is the kind of, you know, like right now we are all working from home, or most of us are working from home, and you know, when you speak about the physical needs, you know, of the organization, it would be quite, you know, interesting to gauge how people are coping with working from home, and when they are actually when their workplace have entered their home life, and how actually you cope if you have a large family, for instance, or if you have flatmate, or you're sharing your working space with your family, for instance, how to make maybe a barrier between the workspace and you know, the family home. One of the easy way, because people ask me sometimes about how do you measure that? So one of the way actually maybe to measure that is very easy actually. You do staff surveys, okay? So all the company I've worked with, and I'm going to cite here Skyscanner, because I was engaged with Skyscanner for about 6-7 years. And we actually started to do a yearly staff survey. And that actually went down to every 6 months, smaller one, but every 6 months. And every question we ask actually were relating to something on this hierarchy of needs. So for instance, do I have the working space necessary to do my job? Do I have the element needed to be able to do my job? You know, do I feel secure in my job? Do I have a friend at work? Do I feel I can count on my peer at work? Do I feel I can trust the management team? Do I feel I can trust my peer? Do I feel I can rely on them if I have an issue, for instance, etc., etc., etc. So you can see that every question you may ask actually can very much find you know, where we are in terms of, you know, the needs needed to create the psychological contract and ultimately this resilience. Okay, so that's a very important part. And again, actually, to create, you know, to do that, you don't need to spend a lot of money. You know, you can use one of these SurveyMonkey or whatever survey online you have and collect the information, but you have to be seen to take action if you do that, because, and we're going to see that in a moment, if you do something like that and nothing happened afterwards, you're going to actually have the contrary effect, which is demoralizing the staff and breaking the psychological contract, okay? But if you want to make this hierarchy of needs very simpler, to me, actually, it translates this into, and translate that actually into workforce resilience. To me, actually, it comes down to about 3 criteria, okay? And the 3 criteria are very much a fundamental sense of security at work, a strong of belonging with the employer, and the adaptability and motivation needed for staff to reach their full potential. So that actually, for me, if you want to create your full workforce resilience, it boils down to maybe these 3 points. And we can still achieve that when we are doing, you know, when we are contracting our organization, okay? So what we're going to do right now is going to be a very pragmatic approach. For those who know me, I'm a very pragmatic person. I give solution, you know, and what we're going to do right now is just to go to a do and don't about how to create, you know, a workforce resilience. And I'm going to concentrate very much on the do for now, because the don't, to be honest with you, is the total opposite or polar of what I'm going to say. So let's concentrate on the do right now. So the first thing I think for me to create a workforce resilience, but also actually a business resilience, is to what I call optimize for agency. Okay, and anybody who's been to any of my talk before, or I've seen actually my business partner, you know, do a talk, we always speak about optimize for agency. Now, what I define what I mean by agencies is to give the individual the right to act on behalf of the company, to act on behalf of the issue they are trying to solve. So now, if you think actually that the black dot in the middle is the executive management, and then you have layers within the organization, and we have staff at the front line. If you think about the arrows, for instance, that's the time you will take to respond to something which is happening in the front line of the organization. So imagine I am a software developer. and I have an issue, for instance, the time I escalate that to the executive management and they give me my feedback, we have lost a lot of time, we have lost agility, we have lost agency. Whereas if actually I allow people to reply, and to take ownership for what they are doing within the circle of influence, for instance, then you actually get much quicker response and you become much more agile, okay? In Skyscanner, for instance, we had an old program which was called the License to Operate. And we had various rebranding of that over the year, okay? But the License to Operate was very much about giving the staff the agency, the empowerment to take decision within the sphere of influence and not to have to escalate all the time to the senior management team. And what we found actually is that by doing so, we created much more engagement, much more resilience as well, because people had accountability of what they were doing and they thought actually it was their duty to solve the issue, okay? At one stage, I think actually the CEO of Skyscanner even called that own the dog. If you borrow a dog, you don't quite own it. If you own the dog, you actually take responsibility for the dog, okay? And you take actually the requirement necessary to actually address the issue that a dog might have, for instance, where if you borrow it, you just actually cope with that a little bit and waiting to give it back to his owner. Now, that was a bit far stretch, I think, in terms of what we were doing here, but it was all actually about this license to operate. And I know it might sound actually a little bit counterintuitive because as we normally go into a command and control while we are in a crisis, but I think for organization, it's very important maybe not to go actually into this command and control if we can, because I believe actually that during a crisis, we must actually, as leader, we must relinquish the belief that top-down response will engender stability. If you think about a crisis is characterized by uncertainty, and leaders face a problem that are unfamiliar and poorly understood. And I truly believe that actually a small group of executive, manager or senior manager at the highest, of the level of the organization cannot collect information or make decisions quickly enough to respond effectively. So I think it's better for leaders actually to mobilize the organization by setting clear priority, for the response and empowering others to discover and implement solutions that serve these priorities. I think that's a very, very fundamental part of optimizing for agency. And the question is, how do we do that, for instance? Well, first of all, you need to have clear ownership of what people are doing. So I need to understand where is my parameter and what's my circle of influence. And within that, you need to clarify accountability and give people the right to be accountable instead of passing the bucks all the time to perhaps the management team and waiting for feedback. So like that, you are not going to create accountability if people wait all the time for an authorization to do something. We need to ensure alignment as well, and alignment is very, very important. So we spoke about strategy, for instance, and it's important to have a great strategy, but it's also important to push that as a forefront of the front line, okay? Because if the front line understand the strategy, understand how we go about, it's more likely to have a very aligned organization, which where people can take their own decision and therefore actually become accountable for what they are doing. And you need to empower people within the sphere of influence. And somebody early in my career, I believe, I was in my 20s, and somebody say, oh, Gail, the hardest thing you're going to face is to let go. And at the time, it's like, what do you mean to let go? Of course, I can let go anytime, I mean, yeah, no problem. And actually, this person was right. Very wise person told me that. I found letting go, quite hard. And I think as business owners sometimes or executive, we find it very hard to let go, but we need to start to trust the people. And to trust the people, I know it sounds like so obvious, but we need to have competent individual within the organization. So let's speak about that in a little bit. I spoke about a bit earlier about the reset button. Okay, so sometimes we need to ask ourselves, if I was going to rehire people in the position where they are, will I recruit them with the skill they have right now? Okay. And as I mentioned, I work a lot with startup, and what I find is people who have joined earlier in the growth of the organization, employee number 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, whatever, are ultimately, in general, in management and senior management position. And the question is, will you hire these people right now, where we are now, if actually we're applying for the job? And if the answer is no, then you need to reset the button, okay? I'm not saying get rid of them. It's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying actually find an organization, find a position within the organization who will suit their skill, for instance, because having these competent skills at the level that you want to, it's very important if you want to create agency. Okay, and sometimes we're afraid to upset people, but it's not fair on them, because I think they must be stressing if they don't have the skills anymore because they haven't grown skills-wise with the organization or with the requirement of the organization. Then actually they must be in a very stressful position, and also they're going to stop your organization growing and recovering as quickly as you really want. So having this conversation is very important. Okay. The second thing actually we're going to speak about in terms of the do, and that's obviously, again, everything I'm going to say is so obvious, but sometimes it's so obvious we don't do it well. It's about leadership, okay? And the first thing actually, when you are in a period of recession, for instance, in contraction, my first advice is communicate, communicate, and communicate. Communication is one of the basic things that we all think we do well, but as an organization, every time I do staff survey, communication come on the top of perhaps, what they want to see more. But when I say communicate, you have to be careful, do the right communication. And one of the things, for instance, is communicate with a bounded optimism, okay? Be confident, but realistic. So sometimes I see people when they are going through a period of contraction who just actually are so optimistic that actually they are completely disconnected from the reality, okay? And in early in a crisis, if the leader display excessive confidence in spite of obvious difficulties condition, I think actually they can lose credibility. I think it's more effective for leader to project confidence that the organization will find, a way through, even though it's a tough situation, but also that they recognize that the crisis, that there's uncertainty in the moment, and they kind of have, started to collect information about how we're going to solve this crisis. And they do so by listening to the forefront of the organization as well. Okay, so the bonding optimism is very important. And when actually the crisis is over and you are going back on the growth path, then actually obviously you can be much more optimistic and far less bonded as well. The other thing actually about bonded optimism is sometimes when we have crises, I find the senior management do exactly the contrary, is that they don't share enough information, who are a bit grim with the staff. And I think that's equally actually go against actually, having the all togetherness, kind of try to solve that together. So it's important that, you have bonded optimism, but it's also important, I think, that people actually tell the truth, maybe a bit of more transparency about actually where is the organization and how it's doing, and then asking everybody to help solve this organization. Because the fact is, if we are all in it together, where the company starts growing again, we're not going to closing, the jobs are saved, there's more security. And that actually will help also to create the psychological contract and having this accountability in terms of hardship. The other thing actually we need to think about is recognize your own limitation. During actually time of recession and contraction, leaders and business owners are going everywhere and doing so much, and I think it's okay as well to pass that on to other people and ask for help. And especially if you create these agencies, you will find actually that will be much easier. and work hard to listen to the front line of the organization and be seen to follow up. If you are listening to the front line of the organization and not following up, people are not going actually to go to the effort actually to give you some views, for instance. So it's very important to be seen to follow up. And again, by doing so, you will elevate leader during hard time. And what I'm saying by that, if you are actually creating this agency we are talking about, if you have, I don't know, Mary next to me, which are much more knowledge in one domain than me, for instance, I will want this person to lead on that, for instance. It doesn't mean that she needs to become, promoted, for instance, or she has to have a promotion. It's just actually somebody will have this domain of expertise and are best to lead that rather than actually me, which is perhaps, a little bit more senior than this person. And what you will find actually like that, you will create pocket of leadership within the organization. And by creating this pocket of leadership, you will again engage people, engage with the creative psychological contract we are talking about, and you will actually find that you are much more likely to succeed in terms of transitioning positively to a growth again. Okay. The next thing we're going to talk about is actually strategic emphasis, okay? And strategy is very, very important, but let's remember that actually aspiration is not the same as strategy. We all aspire to do great stuff, okay? But if there's no path to reaching our aspiration, nobody is going to be aligned. So the alignment I'm talking about and the aspiration, for instance, are not quite, it's not possible without strategy. So I go to organizations sometimes and I see them with a wonderful roadmap, a wonderful aspiration and values and where they want to be. And they have all this, like this roadmap but there's no path actually to reaching to doing the strategy, for instance. So you need actually to make sure that if you have an aspiration, transfer that into being a strategy and transferring to making sure that it's cascade down as an operational plan, for instance, because otherwise the alignment will be lost. And the other thing I will say is for strategy development at the front line of the organization, I'm very truly a believer that the staff at the front line will have a great, part in helping with the strategy, especially when we are actually, trying to go through a hard time. It's a very important part that actually you need to ask your force, you need to ask the front line of the organization to contribute to the strategy. Again, executives who go into the office and have, like workshop just with executive people to create a strategy without perhaps engaging at the front line of the organization, I think are less likely to be successful. And also what's going to happen is going to be quite myopic, the view, okay? It would be just one viewpoint and not the rest of the organization. And then it would be more difficult to cascade that throughout the organization. And it would be actually more difficult for the staff to own that and to feel actually they belong to this strategy. Whereas if you engage people right at the front, the engagement will be already there because they've been a part of it, okay? So that's something to think about. And then I'm going to talk a bit about HR, obviously, because that's what I'm doing. So the people function. Develop HR as a strategic driving force, not as an administrative function. If you have the right person, to lead your people function, yes, we're going to have some administration to be done, but use that as a driving force to actually look at your organization culture, to look at the psychological contract, look at the initiative you can do to try to increase this psychological contract, and put all these kind of things in place that actually will make you successful now, but also will prepare for the growth again to where you want to be, okay? So that was about the strategy, okay, and I already touched a little bit on that, but it's about the strategy now going into the focus of it, okay? So focus on smaller number of priority and do them well. If I think, again, I was talking about this company I deal with who have this massive, roadmap with all this, like very color-coded thing. And what we find actually is that they have so many items inside of their roadmap that none of them get done at the end. So my view has always been, when I go to see organization, is focus on a small number of priority and do them well. Because it's quite easy actually, to be busy all the time, but at the end of the day, if you're not completing anything, what's the point of being busy? And it's going to take much longer. And the staff is going to become demotivated as well, because there's nothing really, to go about. So be a completer finisher. Outcome trump in activities for me. I see sometimes organization and people who are, everybody's busy, but nothing gets done. And for me, that's a big sign that there's a disconnect between, the strategy, the operation plan, and how we are doing things. And the staff at the end is going to become more disengaged, I think, if we don't show that we can be a completer finisher, for instance. Okay. So now you have we spoke about strategy, we spoke about focus, we spoke about leadership, we spoke about agencies, and now we're going to speak about, organization scalability. And organization scalability for me is, what would my company structure look like if I was designing it today from scratch? And again, you might actually end up with an organization who absolutely not look like what you have. And I'm not saying throw it away. That would be so wrong, okay? But what you need to realize is that actually, if you have an organization and you need to plan for your growth again, what do you want your organization, to be when actually it starts to grow? And then look at that and look where you are today, and try to join and make programs and plans to join both together at some point, okay? For me, actually getting the organization ready for growth is a very, very important part, because what we may do sometimes when we are contracting, it's say, okay, we don't need this position, we don't need this position, we don't need these skills right now, and we don't need them for another 6 months. Okay, so if you start to think about, in 6 months' time or maybe 12 months' time, you are going to need what you are going to need actually for your organization to be successful. If you tell me that actually in 6 months you will need these skills, but you don't need them now, I will say actually making people redundant right now with these kind of skills is actually not going to save you any money. And the reason for that is very simple. You lose a lot of the skills, you lose a lot of know-how about the organization, and you will have had to pay these people perhaps a severance payment or some redundancy payment. And by the time actually in 6 months' time that you need these skills again, you will have had to hire a new person, to maybe pay for agency fees. You have the induction to come on board. You have actually the person to get to start to know the organization. So that will cost you at least 3 months of salaries. So if you think about actually the cost between one and the other, sometimes it's actually not worth it, taking harsh decision about the staff without thinking about what the organization will look like when you start to grow again. So that's a very important part. And when you start to look at what the organization will look like when you grow again, make the ultimate organization, and then look how you bridge the gap between what you have now and what you need. Very important. Okay. And finally, we're going to look at what I call cultural scalability, okay? And this cultural scalability is understand the difference between strong culture and obsolete culture. So an organization in which members do not agree with for instance, the core value, or not committed, to the core value, for me has a weak culture, okay? So you need to have a look at your culture and see more or less the gap between what the company is and what you wish to be, for instance, and then get rid of all the things that, is obsolete in your culture, and look at where actually the people want to be or what the organization want to be. And then again, bridge the gap culturally between that. Again, one of the things I see quite often when I go to organization is the core value, and the core values are everywhere or are nowhere to be seen. But the business owner actually somehow, think that we need to keep these core values because they were created right at the beginning of the organization, when the organization was created. Most of the time they were created by the business owner only, and they have a sentimental aspect to those. So therefore, that's why they want to keep it. And for me, actually, if the staff don't understand this core value, don't gel with this core value, don't act upon this core value, bin it or remarket it, do a new marketing campaign about it, because there's no point having them if if they're not used. And I see that quite a lot when I go to businesses, this kind of relinquish, the business owner holding on to what was the business maybe like at its creation, and that's no longer relevant to what it is today. So we have to be able to look at the cultural scalability, and again get the staff engaged, in creating your culture, in creating, the core value, in having actually pretty workforce, helping with, getting the culture promoted within the organization, and to create, to create the culture that you want to be, and where you have the most likelihood to have a psychological contract, created. Okay, so that actually concludes, the do of how to build a workforce resilience and to preserve your business critical factor during a difficult time. I'm not going to go through the don't, because the don't are just completely the opposite of what I just said, and it would be for a very boring and long presentation if I was going to do that again with the don't. So I'm not going to go through that. But remember actually that contracting, if you have a contraction today, it's not the best, but it's the view of actually having a growth tomorrow. And during this contraction, you have plenty of time to perhaps actually think about what you want to preserve, what you want to reset, and how you want your business, what you want to retain now, so your business can grow again and speed up the recovery. Okay, so that's me done for today. I'm going to give back that to Jude, and if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Gail. I've had loads of notes taken, but is it okay if we send some few requests saying that could we get your slides sent out as a PDF to the? Yeah, there's a lot of content there that probably would normally take a few different sessions. I think everybody's been really busy taking notes and stuff, but feedback has been amazing, and thank you very much. I think it's the right conversation at the right time for a lot of the attendees today. Actually, I'll go through. There was one thing that so I've worked with you for a long time, and I used to always think I need some Gail time, and I think this is probably the right time. And it's really good that because I haven't dealt with you in about a year as a coach or anything like that, but there's one thing that I remember that I've always used since working with you is around the change agents. And it's a really simple thing, and it'd be good so particularly if you're going to go through some contraction and change and everything, we're talking about all the cultural side of things, I think it'd be good just to give a description of, because it is such an easy concept to roll out in an organization and keep it going during times like this.
So the change, are you speaking about the people who are the change, how you identified your change agent? Oh, right, okay. So Jude and I actually, we worked a lot, for the last 5-6 years or something like that. And one of the things I was saying to people actually in terms of change agent is to identify actually who are your change agent, early on. And your change agent might not be actually the people you think are next to you, because so if you think about change, people might not like what I'm saying, but they might like what Jude is saying, for instance. And if actually Jude has a good actually network and positive network in the organization, she is going to become a change agent. So therefore, I should rely on Jude, to pass on some of the changes I want to do in terms of the communication and the sponsorship of the changes. And that's a very important part, is to identify across the organization at any level, for instance, who might be your change agent, and actually rely on them to actually promote the change that we want to do. The other thing, obviously, is to identify who are against the change. But my view is never to focus too much on the people who are against the change, because if you have enough change agent and they can actually do their good work in promoting, the change across the organization at different level, then we find that people actually, will become the people who are perhaps not too keen on the change will become absorbed by actually the, you know, the wave of positivity or the wave of communication that is occurring about the changes. So that's a very important part as well. Is that what you were referring to?
Yeah. Yeah. And from it's just so easy then to, if you get these people on board, that they're not, it's not the CEO having to communicate or the managers having to communicate all the time, that your work has been done when you're not there. So suppose that's leadership as well, that it's things going on.
That go back to actually, you know, elevating, you know, leaders throughout the organization, not just because they have a title.
Okay, there's a question from somebody here. So again, doing these, you know, during tough times and stuff like that as well, it said, how do you help CEOs and founders to prove to themselves that their thinking and strategy is correct or viable? So I think it's that self-belief. We've never been through times like this, tough times, and how do you prepare for that? And how do you, how do you help? And I know you're really good at this as well. So
how do I help personally, or how the organization can help?
Yeah, how would you help organizations, or how can CEOs even help themselves? Any tips for the decision, this is the thing, but how do you know it's the right thing to do?
Well, do we ever know? That's the thing. So I think we need to have the confidence that what we are doing is the best we can do for the organization, for instance. And there's one part I was saying, actually push your strategy to the front line of the organization, and get the front line of the organization to feed back into your strategy. By doing that, I think actually you get not the just one view, but multi-layer view. And by getting multi-layers view, I think actually you can create the best strategy you can create, you know, for the tough time. And that's a very important part. And also what you will do by doing that is creating this psychological contract that the staff will be like, okay, do you know what? I'm here for you. I know you are here for me too. So we are going to do that together. And I think actually it's just actually, you know, use your organization as a reinsurance that what you are doing as a leader and what we are doing as an organization is right. So that would be my advice, for instance.
Yeah, good. And then, so you've taken those steps. How sometimes being a CEO or as a founder, and you're saying about engaging the rest of the team as well, but it's that personal resilience. We're not able to go into coffee shops and, you know, have the conversation with maybe our peers or people from different organizations. And that's the bit that I miss around lockdown as well, is just saying to somebody, go for coffee at 11, how's things with you? Yeah, okay. And by the time the coffee's finished, you feel okay about things. But now you're setting up meetings to do that. It doesn't feel, so how can we protect ourselves personally when we're having to make these big decisions and changes?
Yeah, I think actually, as you said, what we are talking about here is having a soundboard, okay? And having a soundboard is always good. And sometimes you have a soundboard because you want to hear what you are saying and how does it sound, and maybe actually getting somebody else's view. And somebody else's view might not change your view sometimes. You could then actually realize you are doing the right thing. And sometimes it might change your view because you might give you a different aspect. And I understand actually you can't just do that just spontaneously nowadays, but you can still do that through Zoom, through phone calls. It's just we all have to be a little bit more organized nowadays and a little bit more structured, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know. So I think actually creating our own resilience as business owner it's the faith that what we are doing is the right thing. By soundboarding to the organization, by soundboarding to people actually who are quite similar, you know. So there's nothing else stopping us, you know, to connect with other organizations. So to give an example, in Skyscanner, we used to soundboard a lot with Spotify. There was no competition between the two organizations, but we were very similar in terms of the age of the organization, but also the way we were implementing things and the growth, you know, like the maturity of the organization. That's what I'm looking for, the maturity of the organization. So yeah, even though we were not in the same room, because we're not in the same country, we used to actually, you know, just soundboard and say, what are you doing? How are you facing that? What's actually the maturity curve you are on? What's a thing to watch for instance? How do you feel about, we Skyscanner and Spotify in both implementing what we call the, we changed totally the organization design, and we had the same organization design for engineering. And how do you find that? How do you feel that? And we didn't know if it was going to be successful, but the only thing we could do is to ask other people who are similar, situation and see how they were doing. And we were helping each other like that. But again, we had to be structured for that because it was 2 different countries, So that's the kind of thing you can do. And that gave us the confidence and the resilience to continue to do what we were going to do. The thing I think we can, sometimes we made a mistake on is changing too often.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So once you decided on the path, make a very conscious decision to maybe soundboard with the staff and with other people before you do so, and then go with it, and don't change every 5 minutes, because then you get disoriented.
Okay. So there's no more questions, but there are some comments from people. So from Elaine Brown, thanks so much, Gail. Loved being the completer and finisher. And Linda Stevens, excellent presentation and so relevant for today. Beautifully clear and businesslike. Thanks, Gail. And then from Elaine Brown, management team know much more than me. So this talk just highlights again to me that my role is to help facilitate what they need, and that will be good for the business.
No, very good. Absolutely. I'm glad to hear this feedback, because my biggest advice is don't isolate yourself, not in time of hardship. Do not do that. Just get the staff involved and the management team involved and the frontliner, involved. And I think actually, you are more likely to recover much quicker like that.
Yeah. And thank you so much for your time, because you've helped me through some pretty scary times and difficult times and different things. So yeah, we all need a bit of Gail every now and again, and it'd be great to get you back on over the next few weeks as well to help everybody on those journeys and the Corona coaster as we're all on at the moment. So
sure, anytime.
Yeah, thank you very much to everybody else that's joined us today. Another one from Elaine Brown, wonderful presentation, thanks so much, great way to start the day.
Good, glad I can help anytime. And thank you for coming.
Thanks, Gail. See you later. Bye, everybody.